You're listening to JJ Meets World, the podcast where anything goes and pants are not required. Our guest today is Deb Dawson, who happens to be my aunt. I really wish I wouldn't have said the no pants required, and then my aunt is the guest today. But we're going to roll with it because this podcast goes everywhere. But first, a word from our sponsor. This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Hello, Facebook listener. Nope.
Let's keep it.
Yeah, we'll just keep going from there.
Yeah.
So hello, Facebook listener, or wherever you're consuming this podcast. Today's guest is Deb Dawson. Deb is my aunt, and we both grew up in the same house, which is kind of amazing to show the many generations. Deb is also an individual who never seems to slow down in her life. She always has something interesting going on. She's got pretty amazing stories. She's traveled all over the globe, and we're going to dig deep into African Soul American Heart, a nonprofit that she runs now that is doing work I couldn't imagine doing next door, let alone on another continent.
Right. You know what is a word I would use to describe your aunt?
What?
Is statuesque.
Oh, yeah.
I think so. Like, she's always just, she looks like she just came off a runway somewhere or whatever. And she's got all this philanthropic stuff going on. And she's one of the busiest people I've met. And the African Soul American Heart has been going for what now, 10 years?
Yeah, a little over.
And previous podcast guest, Matt McGregor, was the shooter on that. And in his podcast episode, he talks about breaking his foot while shooting that. She's got even crazier stories to tell.
Going back to statuesque real quick, Deb at one point was visiting a friend of hers.
Also, she has no arms.
Right, yeah, I know. I'm a little jealous sometimes. I'm like, how come I didn't get part of that genetic makeup here?
I'm talking about statues with no arms. That's why she's statuesque.
Was it the Venus de Milo? Is that the one that does not? No, is that the clam? Or is that the? Do you know? No, no. The Venus is the one that doesn't have the arms.
I think so.
Yeah. That's the statue. Yeah. But I saw a photo once that she was visiting a friend of hers who moved to LA and was very successful in the Hollywood machine. I believe she worked for Universal Studios, but they had these portraits taken where they had professional hair and makeup done, and they look like the headshots you'd see for someone from like the 1930s in Hollywood. They are very shot in black and white, of course, but they are so cool and they're of a different era. And it makes me think that, my aunt would be comfortable in all these different decades, which is something that most people can't say. Like some people are just rooted in the 80s, like Noel Scotch Anderson, our previous guest. He was built for the 1980s. That was the decade that really gave him the biggest boost. But I think Deb is comfortable in all these different decades. So I think people are going to get a real kick out of this episode. And I hope that it'll be a call to arms for those of you who want to support the African Soul American Heart Project. And you can find that all. Deb's got all the great contact information. And we also talk a lot about currency in this. We get this real currency kick.
It's tied to history, which is the real through line. A lot of historical talk.
Do you know what you're going to title this episode?
Not yet.
Oh, I can't wait. So
we're going to figure it out.
Everyone knows what it is already, but I don't. And so I'm very excited about that. So, folks, I want you to enjoy this episode with Deb Dawson. Of course, you can go to jjmeetsworld.com and you can get all the previous episodes, well over 115 episodes previous. And you can go to patreon.com/jjmeetsworld and donate to this podcast as well. Huge thank you to our Patreon donors who every month help us keep the lights on around this place. All right, podcast, go.
JJ Meets World.
Our guest today, Deb Dawson, I believe the first family member of either of us that we've
my
had.
uncle.
Oh, that's right. We did Uncle Baseball.
Uncle Baseball.
Oh, so we've got Uncle Baseball, and so I've got Aunt Deb. So, Deb Dawson, welcome to JJ Meets World.
Thank you, JJ.
We're excited to have you today because we could pretty much just let you start talking, and you could talk about all of your experiences in life, and I wouldn't have to say anything.
I'm looking forward to hearing about baby JJ, too, because you'd be in a prime position to know about stuff that I'd never know.
I don't think that we need to get into that necessarily, but you never know where we're going to end up.
Who knows,
Well,
right?
I could tell you one story which you'll totally understand, and maybe you know this story and maybe you've heard this story, but JJ came when you were a little guy, like, I don't know, 5 or something. You came into the living room and you asked your mom and dad if you could go to a particular movie. I don't remember what movie it was. And they said no. And he said, but it's playing at theaters everywhere.
Yeah, that I can feel like that really happened.
Yep, that really happened. I didn't witness it, but I heard about it, and that's my favorite JJ story.
I live in the house that you grew up in for part of
do.
your life. That's kind of exciting.
Well, I'm thankful for that. I mean, I'm thankful that my sister Patty ended up with that house after my parents left that house, and that you got to grow up there, and the fact that the house is still in the family. I mean, my dad, your grandfather, built that house.
Yeah, in fact, he did such a good job that when I remodeled the master bathroom, it really took a lot more effort than I was expecting, and very quality products at the time.
Yes.
When you moved into that house, of course, the tornado of 1957 set back that construction project, but there's a great photo of the whole family on the front lawn, and it's facing south, and there's nothing.
Yeah, that's
south
right.
of that. This was like
it was
the
Farmers
last
Fields
house. Yeah.
at 18th Avenue. It was Farmers Fields beyond that. No Lincoln School. That wasn't built until I think I was in 3rd grade. And then the cutoff was 18th Avenue. So yeah, there was nothing, just Farmers Fields. And we could run, nobody had fences. We could run through all the backyards, eat people's rhubarb, play with their dogs, stuff like that.
What a different world we live in today, because I think every house on that block has a fence line now.
Yep.
In fact, some of them can't decide if they want the same fence, so there'll be a chain link right up against a wood fence. Just what's the point? Like one person builds it first, and then you just kind of hold on to that.
And then brick wall after that.
But Deb, you've had a lot of amazing life experiences, and you've accomplished so many great things. And at a time when people say like, "Oh, these are my years where I'm going to slow down and focus on hobbies," you are running a nonprofit that is supporting people on another continent.
True enough.
So where do you find the time and the energy?
Well, I think, honestly, I'm 65 and a half, almost, maybe 3/4. I'm more tired, honestly. It does take a little more out of me than it used to, traveling, from here to now I'm going to Uganda primarily. It's a little bit harder, but I have a really good assistant, Jorel Grover. She's just tremendous, and she has my back, and I have a really good bookkeeper who comes in twice a week in the mornings and does all that sort of stuff. So I have people that take care of those important tasks that, one, I'm not that good at, and I need people to do that are good at that sort of thing. Like even the social media. Jorel does that, and she's, I take the pictures. Sometimes other people have pictures also, and we share them, but...
So African Soul American Heart,
yes,
is the name of the organization, and it 2007, as you say, was your first trip?
2007 was my first trip. I flew with Joseph McCall. So it started with a lost boy of Sudan that I met actually through John Marks originally. John Marks had taken, and Dana Delval, who's here in this building, the Arts Partnership. Dana and John took a group of lost boys from Fargo to see a play in Minneapolis called The Lost Boys of Sudan. And Joseph McCall started talking to him about some things, and John called me up and said, I met this lost boy, and I think he should meet you. And I'm like, why? And he said, because he has some ideas, and I think it might interest you. And so I met him at Atomic Coffee, and he had tea because he doesn't drink coffee. And he told me that he was an orphan and that he had raised his younger siblings who were orphans. And he wanted to go back and help orphans in the village he escaped when he was 10 years old. And he thought if he could make a movie, that American people liked movies, and then people could see for themselves and they might want to help. And he had never been to a movie in a movie theater.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But he just knew this was something that most people did. And also he'd seen movies, I think, on television or whatever. So in any case, 6 months later, I flew to Uganda with Joseph and another lost boy. And then we flew from there to Kenya and then into Uganda. There's a mission group that flies in and out, or flew in, well, they still do, but we hired them to fly us into South Sudan and to this remote village where the people that were living there came and, they come out to the whole village comes to the airstrip to see because it's so unusual for a plane to fly in. But there is a clinic in that village built by another lost boy, John Dow. And I think that's where Joseph got the idea because his friend John had built this clinic, but he wanted to do something more specifically for kids. So we got back and we had a movie and it's like, okay, how are we going to help? And so we formed the nonprofit. So it was our 10th anniversary last year. And so we applied for it in January of 2008. And we've been raising money for this purpose ever since. And
the nonprofit, it took an interesting turn where we're going to create this. Is orphanage the right word for it?
It's not the right word. Because we always have been allegedly a school. We built a school in the village in South Sudan, a boarding school. We started out just having the kids come to the clinic and we'd use their lunchroom and, they'd go home to stay with their families. And so it took us a couple years to raise the money to build a boarding school, but the community gave us the land. First thing we did was fence the land so that everybody knew it was our land. We did have one sort of squatter living on a woman who she did help cook, but it took a long time for us to get her off the property. But in any case, we planted trees and, there were lots of trees, but we planted fruit trees and things like that. We had a huge garden area and we built, we started out with tukels, mud huts, and then we built concrete block dormitories and with metal roofs. And the kids went to the local school which only had school in the morning. And then we hired teachers to teach more in the afternoon. And so we were there for several years and the program grew from the first 13 kids to 32. And then the war came or the internal war, the conflict between the two major tribes, the Dinka and the Nuer. The president is a Dinka. The vice president was a Nuer. It started with an outbreak of violence between the prison guards and spilled over, these two tribes against each other. So it was no longer the North persecuting the South. Now it's two tribes that look exactly alike. You couldn't tell the difference except for maybe different scarring on the forehead, which they don't do anymore for most children. But that was a common thing at puberty to make scar marks on the forehead to distinguish your tribe and so on.
Is their political system one where in an election, the one with the most votes becomes president and the second one becomes vice president, like we used to do at the founding of this country? Is that why? Or is it like a ticket, so they ran together? No,
I think you might be right. I've sort of forgotten. I was there when they voted, and I was there on Independence Day. Which was, historical moments to be there. I think it might have been, I don't remember honestly, but that was the situation. The president was a Dinka and the vice president was a Nuer. There was an outbreak of violence among the prison guards, and then it became these two tribes against each other. And it continues, although it's more, it's not so much government soldiers out doing this anymore. It's other tribes. There's just terrible things still go on. One of our girls lost her last remaining relative about a year ago, and that was an attack by another tribe called the Murle, who mostly steal cattle and children. They come through a village, they steal the cattle, because cattle is their exchange, that's their money. And the children, their tribe has not been amenable to things like Doctors Without Borders and missionaries and so on. And they have a lot of venereal disease. And so many people are infertile. So they kidnap children and sell them to families that don't have their own children.
Wow.
So that happened recently. And like I said, one of our girls lost her aunt, who was the only living relative she still had.
So the war the conflict takes place. And so what does that do to the boarding school?
Well, it was ransacked. The girls were home. They were home with their extended families. They're all orphans, but they have aunts or uncles or grandparents or someone who is, their family. And so they were home and in 6 different villages in the county. But all those villages later, fled one place or another. And so one of our current staff members was working for us back then as well. He and others, but he was the primary one finding the kids that were missing. And we found them in 11 refugee camps in 3 countries, Kenya, South Sudan, and Uganda. I went back to Kakuma Refugee Camp in northern Kenya to visit the girl that was there and get permission to bring her. And I hired someone to drive her to South Sudan. So anyway, we did reunite them, and then we added more kids.
So what amazes me is you're based out of Fargo. It's not like you took 5 years and spent 5 full years in Africa overseeing all of these things going on. How do you get a building built when you are thousands and thousands of miles away working, especially I've heard some of your stories about how just tough the travel is to get into some of these countries, and how, there's obviously a lot of corruption. There's obviously a lot of need. And so going there with a suitcase full of things and coming home and that suitcase is empty because you've given everything out that you have there. But how do you come by the concrete blocks to build the building and arranging to get fruit trees brought in? What is that whole process like?
Well, the concrete blocks, when we were building the buildings in South Sudan, we have some short videos that show, some of this stuff going on. In fact, we have a new documentary called African Sojourn, and you'll see the concrete block building method, which is a metal frame that they put together with a metal stake. And then they pour in a mixture of sand that they dig up outside the village or near the village and mix with water and some cement. And so they put them in the frame, and then they let them dry after, they open it and they let them dry, and then they put them in a wheelbarrow and they take them across to where the building is going to be built.
Oh, man.
I mean, it is complete manual labor.
Yeah, because it's not
everything is by hand.
They're not going to the Home Depot.
They don't have, anything to dig up soil and to, it's dug by hand.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's amazing.
I know that you had the debut of the new documentary,
Yes.
right? And what I also think is amazing too is how you've drummed up such a huge amount of support locally, nationally. African Soul American Heart is something that everybody in Fargo knows about now because it's been so active. And I love the idea of Fargo, North Dakota having a stake in what you're doing on not only another continent, but with a group of people that they will probably never meet.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. I think it's been a wonderful learning thing for people here in our community. I do a lot of speaking to groups and so on, and people are pretty interested because it's so different. Most people have never experienced some of the things that I've seen. I'm in Uganda now, and it's a lot more. There's a lot more to do in Uganda than there was in South Sudan. I very much miss the village because living in the village, and I was there. I did have to evacuate when there was a threat of a tribe coming to attack the village, but for the most part, I always felt perfectly safe there, and I could walk all around. And I'm the only white person there most of the time. Once in a while, there's another white person, and eventually, I started taking Jessica, my videographer, with me because I couldn't run a program and film it, and it's like too difficult to do that. And plus, that wasn't my forte to run cameras, and so except for I can take pretty good pictures.
Yeah, you've been taking photographs for a long time.
Yeah.
That's been a passion of yours as well, too.
Yes. And what wonderful material to take photographs of.
Yeah.
When you have these longhorn cattle, right there, and, I can take a picture, and baby goats. I'm very, very fond of baby goats because they're so cute. They're like little straight-legged puppies, and they're very easy to pick up.
Yeah.
And so I am always happy to pick up a baby goat when I can. I'm pretty good at catching them.
Well, and so so let's take a hard left into your past. For a while, you lived on a farm that was self-sustaining, right? No electricity or anything like that, right? Was that?
In the U.S., are you talking about?
Yeah, way back in more of a flower child type day.
Yeah, sort of. Except we had electricity.
Did you?
Yeah, we had electricity. You probably were.
I mean, I wasn't even there at all.
So it was not exactly accurate, but and it wasn't I both rented a farmhouse one time where it was a working farm, but they weren't they had built another house for the people that actually ran the farm, and so we rented the old house, and so I did gardening and canned food and things like that back in those days.
You got to do all the stuff that's really popular now with my generation of oh no, we're gonna do these things the way that we learned back in the day. So canning is big in my house still, once a year.
Well, and your mom was just a great pickle maker.
She was. I still can't get the recipe just right. I have a feeling that there was something that she did that she did not write down. That just drives me crazy.
Now, your mother had the best handwriting.
Oh yeah, beautiful handwriting.
And we had a conversation one time where she was, she was much younger, but she was like, "There's nothing good about me. I'm just blah 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 blah." And I'm like, "That's not true." And she said, "Yes, it is." I said, "Patty, you have beautiful handwriting." She was really offended, but I have horrible handwriting. I can't always read my own handwriting, so I struggle to have nice handwriting. To be fair,
if someone's like, "God, I suck," and you were like, "You don't suck. Your handwriting's really nice." Like, I'd probably read into that too. Like, I really do suck.
Yeah, but I really did admire her handwriting. She did have beautiful handwriting.
My mom wrote only in cursive. So hand,
my mom's the same way, and her handwriting is immaculate.
I'm always impressed because I am in the same boat as you, Deb. It must be something genetic because I'll look at it and be like, Turkton.
Yeah.
What's Turkton?
My dad writes like a doctor who just got hit by a car. Right? So like you can kind of see what the first letter is, and it's mostly a squiggly line after that.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? So they've stopped teaching
Yes,
cursive in
That
schools.
seems crazy.
I remember that was the bulk of third grade for me.
Yeah.
Was like learning how to make
that
an
loop
S.
went above the middle dotted line. I gotta keep it lowered.
I mean, are they even making that paper anymore with the dotted line so that you don't go above it unless it's a capital? And
It's just everything is typed now.
Right.
I mean,
And a lot of times it's typed with two thumbs
with
on your
thumbs. It's been a while since I have done this, but for a solid year there, not too long ago, every night before going to bed, I would purposely sit down and write in a journal with my hand.
Yes.
Not that I needed to document my deepest, darkest secrets. It was like whatever came to my mind as long as it was words.
Yes.
And I took my time writing it because my handwriting is bad when I'm impatient.
Uh-huh.
When I take my time,
Yes.
it's legible.
Yes.
And so I would just do that as almost like a meditative exercise before bed. It helped. I want to find that notebook and continue in that notebook because I had made some good progress in it. And it was
Cool.
also nice to look over previous pages and just to
Yes.
see the amount of writing you had done.
Yes.
I got to pick that up.
I've been a journal keeper, but I somehow have stopped doing that. And I have a bunch of journals, blank ones that I bought because I like them as well. So I think maybe my handwriting might have been why I stopped, but I think I want to resume that because there's something different about writing with a pen or pencil.
The intentionality
than
of it.
to type it.
Yeah.
Right. Because in typing it, you can easily redo.
Right.
You can type almost as fast as you can think.
Right.
But when you take the time to think enough so that you know exactly what you're writing by hand, your message is more intentional. I also found that the secret for me as well is to make sure it's a ringed binder that can lay flat. Because if it's a bound book that bends in the center, I find I start to get frustrated by the center area because it's not laying as flat as everything else.
Yeah.
So I really need like a curated experience for before I start. And it needs to be a black pen that's got a really nice ink to it that just flows out. And no pencils, no blue pens.
Yeah.
None of that nonsense.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, very specific. But I don't think I slept better than I did when I was doing that. Just because
do you feel like you're able to take what's in your mind and just kind of get it out so that you can have
I think that was
a restful
part
sleep?
of it, especially if it was a day where there was something big to say, but there were days where nothing of note happened. If anything, I think it has to do with not looking at an electronic screen where you're getting all that blue light before the end of the day.
Yeah.
Also, I have circus brain at night, and so it focused my brain into doing something specific and intentional. Where I would force myself to, if I saw my handwriting was getting messy, I'd go slow down,
Wow.
and just start writing more. And it was always in print; it was never cursive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got to pick that back up again because it was really beneficial when I did it.
I think I would like to pick that practice up as well. And so maybe your intention and my intention, we can both.
Exactly.
And then check out
There you go.
later and see how you're doing.
I think another key too is to not put pressure on yourself to make anything interesting. It's like,
it's just to write.
If the words you come up with today are, man, it was cold outside, I drove around a lot, then I had McDonald's, and then now I'm watching TV. That's fine.
Fine.
Just write that out and be intentional with it as you're writing it. And it did wonders for my mental state, which probably explains a lot. I should probably get back into that.
There you go.
It'll help me.
There you go. I know it will help me.
You want to know something that helped me in my careers that I've had over the years that you're directly associated with is for a while you worked for Pitney Bowes.
I did, yes.
And
What's Pitney Bowes?
So that's the thing. So I walked into so many offices and be like, oh, that's a nice Pitney Bowes machine. And I only know about it because talking with you. And I impressed the receptionist or the office administrator in a way where I'm pretty sure that's why I have my day job now,
There
is
you go.
because I was able to throw that out there. So Deb, what's Pitney Bowes?
Well, Pitney Bowes makes automatic mailing equipment. And so they're the things that print the stamp on your letter and can have a little statement. You can have other things that it does. And you pay the post office for the postage. It used to be you had to take the postage meter to the post office and they refilled it, essentially, which you gave them the money and they put that value in there and then it printed on your envelopes. And now you just call up on the phone or something and it's just automatic the way And I suppose a credit card does it.
Do they had a folding machine too, right?
They
was very popular.
They have folding machines, inserters. Now, when you get like a bill from Macy's, and if it has a bill and a flyer for perfume and men's clothing or whatever, they have machines that are sophisticated enough that it would send you the one that has the men's clothing thing, and it would send me the one with the perfume, and so on. So, and it's just like, it's so amazing to watch one of the. We only had one guy at the branch. I was in Denver that sold inserting machines, and he didn't have to sell that many of them to make a lot.
Oh, I can imagine.
But, the postage meter thing all the things have changed because now some things are not mailed anymore. I'm sure it's affected the post office.
We just had to upgrade our machine at my day job, and it was huge that this new Pitney Bowes machine was coming in because you've learned how to use the old one, and for us, we're sending out statements for billing, and we're sending out prize packs, mailings for all sorts of things, and so they make use of that machine a lot. And it must have been from the mid '90s because it had that. That bluish gray plastic color that was very popular, like with Hewlett Packard for a long time. So the whole machine was made out of that color. So that's how I sort of dated it.
Sure, that makes sense.
But the new one's super fancy and it's all touch screen. And I'm sure you can run some of it from your phone.
They didn't have that back in the day that I was doing that.
They didn't?
No.
That was only a dream.
We had a really nice guy that worked on my sales team. I ended up a manager there, and he had dyslexia. And so one of the problems with selling, these machines is they're called like the 5840 or the, 62, whatever.
Like the model numbers?
The model numbers. And so he would mix up the model numbers. And even, he'd have to have someone check his paperwork when he handed it in to make sure he'd put the right model number down. But it's like he would say to the person, it's a, 5480 or whatever. And I said, just tell them it's the smallest automatic, postage meter. They don't care what the number is. You don't have to use those numbers.
It seems like products, there's so many technical products out there with numbers like that it makes me go, don't let the engineers name this thing.
Right.
Like, let them build it, but let the name come from someone who's not going to put a weird serial number at the beginning of it. How are you supposed to remember? I don't have dyslexia, and I forget that stuff all the time.
Right.
And I'll talk to video people, and they'll be like, oh, yeah, I'm shooting on the new H2M 16500 with the blah, 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 blah.
Lost me at...
Yeah. Say camera, please.
It's not only the technical people, but have you ever talked to somebody in produce, like their job is produce and ordering it? They don't call it Macintosh apples. They call them like A3570.
So you can be very specific about your order.
Right, exactly. So you're getting, and it involves the growing season as part of it. So like winter apples have a different designation than summer apples. And, cucumbers are different if they're an English cucumber versus like I don't know, an American cucumber. Do we have that? I don't know. I'm not in produce.
I prefer that Mexican cucumbers, really.
And that's the thing. There probably are. That you probably have all these products from different countries.
Cucumbers.
Period.
From anywhere.
Right. He doesn't even like pickles.
Oh, I love. Pickles are. They are cucumbers generally,
but anything pickled I can't do.
I'm not a big pickle person. I did like your mom's pickles, but they'll last a long time if I have this in the house because I don't eat them very often.
Yeah, JJ's wedding, I was disgusted by the centerpieces.
I know. Yeah, you were one of the people who left that there, weren't you?
Yeah.
That got me through a winter. We probably had like 100 of those left afterwards.
Slices
they were little
of a
tiny jelly
disgusting
jars.
vegetable. Awesome.
Do you know how long it took to make all of those?
A lot of time.
So long. And previous guests Phil Goodell and Britta Nelson didn't know that they were coming over to help me with that. And so I was like, hey guys, we got to make 300 of these and then we'll get on to our regular canning.
My guess is they owed you though.
They certainly did. They certainly did. Another neat thing that Deb and I share is we were directed by the same man at Fargo South High, but decades apart, Lee Meister.
Oh, yes.
And because did he do all the drama stuff when you were at Fargo South?
He did, I'd say, the bulk of it. Jim Ebsen was also there.
Oh,
and
sure.
He was my speech coach, but he did some of the drama stuff as well.
Do you remember what shows you were in?
How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying.
Oh, what part did you play in that?
Hedy LaRue.
Oh, really? That's a fun role.
That's a fun role. It was a very fun role.
You get the Heart of Gold duet in there.
Oh, yeah. And she's a bad singer, you know. Yeah, so.
Isn't it great when you get a role where they're like, I get to purposely
that was a very fun show. I was in a bunch of other ones as well. When I was a senior, not for a regular play, but for National Honor Society, Stacy Richardson, who was a classmate of mine, and I were in a 2-man show, and it was called The Summoning of Everyman. I would really like to find a copy of that script, but I've tried to, and I haven't been able to find it. Maybe Lee Meister would have that. But Jim Ebsen was the director. So anyway, the issue is I'm Everyman and she's Death, and so we're acting out this performance, and I break, character at some point to tell them that we've been rehearsing this, and that what's going to happen is basically I'm going to die because this is going to be real now. And I'm upset and talking. And Mark Feldy, who was in my class, was in the audience, and he got up. He was going to come and take me off the stage because he thought I was having a breakdown of some sort.
Oh, he didn't realize it was part of the script.
Yes, it was part of the script. So anyway, it was apparently quite effective.
Oh, wow.
He did not take me off the stage, but he was apparently very close to
He's right there
doing that. And
cool.
Anyway, that was I think a shining moment of my acting career, my very short-lived acting career.
Did you ever think about trying to do more like community theater?
I started out
like
a theater and dance major in college, and my father said, that's not a practical major. You can get a teaching degree. And so I ended up with a teaching degree. I graduated in 3.5 years with a double major and a minor. English, elementary ed, and French was my minor.
Because it's so easy to do that in 3.5 years.
Well, I took CLEP tests, and I tested out of all the required subjects. I didn't have to take any freshman and sophomore, English and that. So I got to start right off the beginning of college with cool stuff.
See, my college career ended before it began because when I went to go do my testing for MSUM, I did so poorly in the math test that they placed me in the pre-101
level
math
99.
class.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't really good at math.
Well, I mean, I was awful, and I just thought I don't ever want to do this ever again. And so a month later, I just didn't go to school anymore. But it was in my heart. It was the moment I found out I'm going to have to go through 2 math classes just to get my generals done. And I'm barely going to survive those things. I don't want to spend this time to do that. So I wish I had better luck with it. Had I done better on that test, I might have tried to stick it out through college for sure.
Yeah, I was really lucky that I had taken those CLEP tests that let me test out of all that stuff. I got exemption from like math and science, but I didn't get credit for it. But all the other stuff I got credit. So that's why I had all those undergraduate credits and let me finish school fast.
Did you ever teach?
I did teach school for a couple of years in Denver. I taught at a private school for gifted kids and, 2 different actually. The first school I taught at was not for gifted kids. It was for parents that were working. They had before and after school care. And so Adrian and Aaron Adrian was just about old enough for kindergarten and Aaron was not, but they got to go to the kindergarten class. And then in the afternoon, Aaron came to my classroom, my 3rd grade classroom. I only had, I think, 11 students. And so we had a little toy corner and he could play and people that were done with their work could hold him and, so it was kind of a lucky situation.
Isn't that neat? Because that would never happen today. They would be like, nope, not going to happen. In fact, you would in some ways be shamed by your peers for being a woman who wanted to have a job as well as be a mother and, not want to leave your child at a daycare facility all day.
Right. Well, and I couldn't have afforded. When I started working there, I was being paid, I think like $6.25 an hour. I kid you not.
Wow.
With a college degree in elementary ed. And my my certification had expired, so I got hired at this private school, which had before and after school care for, working parents, and she just didn't want to pay anybody very much, so that's how I got to work there. But then the next year I had renewed my certification and was able to get a little bit better teaching job.
Do you ever? How's your French today?
Je parle un peu le français. I have a nice accent and I can say a few things, but if I had to carry on a conversation, I'd run out of words pretty fast.
I took French all the way through my junior year of high school, and then I decided I was done with it because we had a teacher who focused more on reading and understanding reading and writing French than speaking it. And so all of a sudden I was like, I don't know if I'm even pronouncing half of this stuff right. And that's the fun, right, of speaking another language.
Right.
It's fun to understand, but it's really great to speak another language.
Oui.
But
SCA. Grille.
Oh, you
is
took
that
Latin?
pig Latin?
I could speak other languages too, guys.
Did you ever see a movie? Because I know you're a movie buff too. You see a lot of movies. Did you ever see La Gloire de Mon Père?
I don't think so. I think I've heard of it though.
It is an excellent film. It's got a sequel, Le Chateau de ma Mère, but it is like a beloved novel from France, and then they turned it in. It's the turn of the century, and it's a little boy talking about a summer when his father, who is a teacher at a school, rented this summer cottage, and them living out in this cottage space. It is an amazing movie. It's so good, and the French is so
on
immersive.
Netflix or something?
I think maybe it probably is. I for sure have it on DVD, so I'll loan it to you.
Oh, I would love to see it.
Yeah, they're very, very good, and they really help like the love of the French language, and then knowing a little bit about the history of France. And of course, we all just recently experienced the fire at the Cathedral of Notre Dame, that I think everyone realized that they've got a little bit of like love for the French culture during that, because it affected people in such an amazing way.
I thought it was also interesting to see the sort of initial outpouring of support from the 1%ers who were saying, we're going to donate all this money. And then it came out that there's like a huge tax break for the amount of money that they were all donating to it. And so a lot of people had to publicly say, I will return the tax break. Like, I won't use this tragedy as a way to bolster myself a little bit. And I mean, when it was on fire, I thought, this is a tragedy. Yeah. I also know it's going to be rebuilt in about 5 days. Not 5 days and being facetious.
It'll be prioritized as rebuilding.
It's the national treasure of France, and there are so many altruistic people who want to see it rebuilt again.
Well, I've heard some ideas of some really fancy modernization of some things too. I don't know if they're just bandying this around, but
I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I don't know exactly what they are, but I think there's a lot of people talking about what exactly. Should it be exact replica, or do you do some stuff a little differently?
I've heard some solar panel ideas, and trying to be a little more conscious of the environment as they're rebuilding it.
If you haven't had a chance to yet, you should always find, if you can take the opportunity to go to a country where people were there a lot longer than they were here.
Yes.
And visit some of the historical sites that those people spent time in. I'm not a believer in any sort of mysticism or anything, but when I walk into one of those places,
it's incredible.
I feel it. And I think part of that is because I love and respect the history.
Yeah.
But just thinking of the amount of people that would have gone through that building and used that space. In 2002, my mom took me to Ireland for 10 days, and we took a tour of one of the Aran Islands off the coast and visited an old church from 400 AD, right? Wow. So it was about my height with no roof because it had rotted away. It was just this rock shell, basically. And people used to congregate in there and worship or eat or whatever, or ride out the storm. And I'm in this tiny little building with no roof, and I'm the only person in there, and it could fit inside the room we're in right now.
Wow.
And it just felt electric to be standing in this place and to touch the walls and go, people who are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years older than me built this and lived in this and cried in this and spent time together in this. And it's an amazing feeling. So when I think of a place like Notre Dame, I think that's a tragedy because of the amount of souls that passed through there and imprinted on it and cared about it, and the amount of history it means. The notion that these pieces of wood that have been around there for hundreds of years are now just gone. Right? They're just vapor. That's the tragedy to me.
I also think the innovation it took to build that building
in those days.
Yeah. And that, I think, is one of the great losses. There's an amazing, it's like a pseudo documentary, and it's a little educational film called Cathedral. You can watch it on YouTube, and it must have been from the 80s because that's what the video looks like.
Yeah.
But they talk about how what a church means to communities and how big of a deal it was in these villages to be chosen by the Catholic Church to have a cathedral built in there. And so they go between this video of interviewing people in the 80s versus like it's an animated segment of them building like what it means to this village when they start like the building and how, they're using plumb lines. They don't have the lasers or even the modern building techniques we have. They're using the same techniques that the pyramids used.
Right.
And it's amazing. I remember watching it in Western Civilization in high school, and then I actually emailed my teacher and I was like, "What's the name of this thing?" He goes, "You can find it on YouTube."
Right.
Good news.
It's tough to think about a lot of those old buildings too, especially in our nation's capital, which I was just in a couple days ago. There are all these amazing monuments and buildings, but then you think about the time they were built in, and you realize they were built by slave labor. Mm-hmm. That
True.
Those buildings exist on a foundation of dead capital, of lives and blood, that and generations of people whose names we took away and whose lives we took away, and they're embedded in the foundations of those buildings. And I knew that fact, intellectually, I understood that was a thing. But when I was in DC, and I'm walking around and I'm looking at the Washington Monument, and then I'm just thinking about it, like the amount of lives that were thrown at one or another of these buildings. Do you know if the same would be true for like the Notre Dame?
So I don't believe so, because slavery in France was not what it was in the rest of the world. Most of Europe, you're enslaving the poor more than anything. It's not a racial based, but it was a big deal to be one of the masons who got to work on this, and you were learning a craft the whole time. And I think in the movie shows it about how the fact of the matter is nobody really. How do I want to say this? No one cared about the lives. So at one point there's a major accident and like 10 men die. And the problem is like, well, what are we going to do now? We need to find 10 men from somewhere else to continue the construction because there's no OSHA. There's no one watching out for these elements.
People would be the descendant of stonemasons, right? So I'm from a long line of stonemasons that have been working on the basis of these buildings.
Well, and they took generations to build. So, people just outlived their lives, and it took a long time.
And there's no such thing as retirement. You worked until your body could no longer work anymore, and then hopefully somebody would take you.
You weren't really trusting in the bank or anything. You had the wooden box at home.
Yeah,
that you slept on top of.
Yeah. I always think of that scene in the animated Robin Hood movie where the two mice bring the coin out to put in the collection box, and how big of a deal it is for them to be able to give something, and they want to give something to the church, but they don't have many means, and how big of a deal it is to the friar to see that. And
this kind of is dovetailing into another recent interest of mine, which is precious metals. I've just been learning about them and stuff. And those are objects that's a material that is intrinsically tied in with human history, especially because almost all of the gold that's ever been dug up and almost all of the silver that's been ever dug up is still here. Mm-hmm. We still have it, especially the gold, because the gold was always preserved and saved. And so if you have some gold with you, there's a chance that was a part of a stash from, some other part of the world at some other time, and it got melted down and reformed into something else. And so it's weird to think of things like that 4,000 years ago, there was these metals that people were still treating as money, and we're still seeing like that and imbuing with some kind of abstract value that was able to go on and go forth.
Well, so tying back into our conversation with you about how cattle are treated as currency. In Italy, salt at one point was a currency. And so I find the idea of something that has a monetary value to always be very interesting, in the fact that why do we give it this power? And so I understand why a cattle would, because cattle provides life.
Right.
It provides sustenance and sustainability
Milk,
for life.
food, or meat, either one. Yeah.
And so is it that we just we want something that is not in abundance, and that's why we give gold and silver?
Yeah, I mean well, gold in particular is rare enough, and so like it doesn't tarnish. It's chemically inert, so it looks as shiny now as it did when they first dug it out of the ground. And I think a part of it too is that we imbue something with what we gave to get it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you gave a couple hours of your day, of your life to get that thing, you see it almost as a store of that energy that you put into it, as that carryover of value, life trade for something. Or if you traded a bunch of oxen for it, it just becomes sort of a replacement for that. It becomes a way to take the value of all your oxen and be able to put it in your pocket and take it to another place. And and certainly gold is one of those things that multiple civilizations seem to adopt on their own. And so I think it's because it was so rare, it was so malleable. You can make it into a tiny, thin slice, or you can make it into a big bulky thing. It's shiny. Nothing else looks like it, as pretty as it is. It takes a lot to get it. So I think that's a part of it too. Another thing I didn't realize though is that there's more silver in the Earth's crust than there is gold, but there's more gold above the Earth's crust than there is silver, because we prioritize digging that up so much, which interesting fact. It's just weird to me. And I want to know 4,000, 5,000, however many thousands of years ago that humans first started doing that. It seems like it would have taken a long process to figure out what gold was, where you found it, what you had to do to get it. Because
what value it then has intrinsically, as you exchange it.
Nations had like a
else.
silver, gold, copper ratio.
Okay.
So like how much copper would get you a silver piece, how much silver would get you a gold piece.
Okay.
And even in like Roman times, they had like a ratio for it. It just blows my mind. It blows my mind that for that long we've been treating this found object that was born in the heart of a neutron star out in space somewhere. And we're just like, oh, it's shiny, and we're going to imbue it with value.
Well, and how much it changed human history and the exploration that we do.
True.
The tragedy, the absolute murder,
right?
Rampant murder that we've done for it.
True enough.
Because the Spanish Spain was just fine, but
Yeah.
they wanted more gold, and so that's why they're explorers and became conquistadors.
Yeah. World War II, they were literally pulling it out of the mouths of Jews.
Oh, which
right? Just ripping it from their bodies.
Did you ever see the movie Monuments Men? So unfortunately, it's not a very good movie. It's a great premise. The true story of these men who were collected. Some of them were art historians. Some of them dealt with just history in general. But it was a U.S. forces group who were in charge of going and protecting and collecting these pieces of history. So imagine like in World War II going and trying to get into a museum so that you could collect, these pieces of art to make sure that they don't fall into the hands of the Germans or just get bombed and destroyed. There's one point when they end up in this bunker where you find out that the Nazis have stolen all of this artwork, which truly did happen. And there's a big barrel, and they put their hand in this barrel and they pick it up, and they're like all these little gold chunks. And when they realize that they are the gold fillings from human teeth, and we're talking like a giant wooden barrel,
my God.
like it is just
That's creepy.
It is so creepy, and that's the only part of that movie that really gave me a feeling of like what's going on in that moment. And
Well,
yeah,
Aren't humans great, you guys? Aren't we just great? Warring tribes of all kinds and everywhere.
Well, so the Monuments Men thing is a good switch over here with. At one point, Deb, you and I went to a bunch of movies together. Do you remember this when I was like in middle school?
maybe, yeah.
And you, for some reason, it's when I think it was the 60th anniversary of The Wizard of Oz came out.
Okay.
And so we saw that at West Acre Cinema, and then we saw Waking Ned Divine together. Wow. And there was a nice little selection of movies there. And it was at an age when I wasn't old enough to drive to a movie theater. Mm-hmm. My parents definitely didn't not like going to movies. No. And my sister was sort of like, meh. So I could ride my bike out to the cinema, which was a long way then. Today, no sweat.
Just take 17th Avenue.
Yep. Boom, I'm good to go. But that's when Fargo ended at 32nd Avenue South, and that was the tail end. But I really fondly remember those times and being like having an adult who I could talk about movies with afterwards. Especially, I remember after Waking Ned Divine, we went out and had dinner and we broke down all these aspects of the movie, and I had such a great time with that. Why do you like movies?
You know, I like movies in a movie theater better than watching them at home. I mean, I like the big screen. I like the darkness. I like to, because then I feel like I can immerse myself in the story. Mm-hmm. And I mean, some movies are better than others, but I like to read as well. I don't read as much as I used to. I still go to a lot of movies, and I would like to read more, but I just feel like I'm too much, I don't know, don't have the same attention span to sit and read a book. But when I'm in a movie and it's dark and I can just watch that, it's quite lovely. I was at a movie within the past year or so with Kristen Rudrud and Drake, my grandson Drake, who is now 7. So he was probably 5 or 6. It was a Walt Disney movie. I can't remember they did a series, I think, of different animal movies. And so this was Monkey Kingdom, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
So Monkey Kingdom. And Drake is in between Kristen and I. And Kristen tends to nod off. And so she nodded off. And Drake realized this. And he pushed her and he said, "Wake up!" Because he was afraid it was like a good part and he didn't want her to miss it. So she woke up. So
well, I have an amazing movie theater memory from seeing a very forgettable film called Monster House. It was an animated movie about a house that was a giant monster itself. And the climax of the film, this thing's also like over almost 20 years old, so there's no spoilers. Don't worry about it. There's a moment where this kid is swinging on like the line from a giant piece of construction equipment, and he's got dynamite in his hand, and he has to throw it down the chimney to blow up this house from the inside. And the movie slows down, and you can just hear the beat of this kid's heart. And he's looking at it and he's waiting. It's like, oh, he's already past the point. He's past the point. And this kid in the audience yells, "Throw it!" And I love those moments where you're so completely engrossed in what's going on that you can't help but have some kind of a reaction that you can't control.
I can tell you about a situation for me. I don't remember the name of the movie. It was a Jerry Lewis movie. And there's a scene in the movie. And I'm there with friends. I'm in junior high school, good age to go to the movies. I'm with friends. And Jerry Lewis I can't remember. I think he's driving a truck or else he's standing in the street. I don't remember which one. Anyway, this truck is barreling down this narrow alley and it's going to hit him. I think it's going to hit him. And I stand up and I say, "Look out!" in the movie theater with friends around, and immediately realized that it wasn't really happening. Yep. So that's me at the movies.
Hearing that story makes me now want to watch The Disorderly Orderly.
Oh,
it's been
great.
so long since I've seen that movie.
Yeah. Jerry Lewis really, you could take an entire class on how he transformed physical humor.
Yes.
Because he was doing what a lot of other comedians before him, like the Buster Keatons and the Charlie Chaplins, had done. But now he's mixing the sound and the color aspect into it. Oh, my God.
Now, he's not with us anymore, right?
No, he's passed away.
Right. So that means that we're really close to getting
The Day the Clown Cried.
Day the Clown. Have you heard of that movie?
I haven't.
Holy Grail film for film lovers. It's a movie that Jerry Lewis made in, I don't know, the 60s or something, 70s.
I want to say it was like mid-70s.
Mid-70s, called Day the Clown Cried.
He directed it, wrote it, starred in it.
Yep. Was never released.
Okay.
And it's about a Jewish man who is a clown, and he gets put in a concentration camp during World War II. And then he basically clowns to entertain the camp's children. Mm-hmm. And as the story goes, it was plagued with problems and all this stuff. They finally make the movie, they finish it, and it's awful. And he can tell that it's awful. Mm-hmm. And so he's like, "That's it. I'm shuttering this movie. I'm putting it in a vault, and no one's ever going to see it." And so we've only ever had still frames from it. and some behind the scenes footage of it, but never the movie itself.
There's
ever.
like 6 people on the planet who have seen it,
Right.
including Harry Shearer, who does voices on The
Right.
Simpsons and was in Spinal Tap.
Exactly. So Lewis had said that it'll be available to view like 5 years after his death or something like that. So, I mean, it's morbid, but I was kind of waiting for him to die so I could start the clock on that thing because I want to see that movie really badly.
I think at this point it's become such a piece of Hollywood lore
Yes.
that people can't wait to finally experience it in a way. You know, there's rumors that the ending is him leading children into the gas chamber.
Super.
And he's trying to, you know, he knows what's about to happen and he's trying to, you know,
Make light of it.
make light of it so that they don't understand
Right.
what's taking place. And I'm also very desperate to see this movie just because you hear, you know, for a movie starring one of the most famous people in the world to
Never been seen.
Yeah, to sit in a vault, right? Could you imagine like Tom Hanks making a movie today that just never gets released? And
especially if it was a passion project.
Yeah.
Right? Like bad movies get made all the time
Right.
and oftentimes they don't
Right.
see the light of day and we don't care about them. But if it was a passion project that they put a lot of time and effort into and then it still turns out bad.
yeah, it'll be
Well,
interesting.
when you get your hands on it, let me know because I want to see it too.
Okay, good. Well, we'll get that going.
Okay.
One thing that I like about going to movies is I like the group experience of
Yes.
a movie, being with strangers and listening to what people are laughing at. And,
Yes.
you know, hearing sobbing going on from 2 seats away, and it's such an interesting experience because most times when you're in close proximity with strangers like that, they are not comfortable situations. For
Yeah.
example, I can't tell you how uncomfortable I am every time I get on a plane. You know, someone coughs and then you think, oh my God, they're going to recirculate that air. And now I'm going to have strep throat when I get done with this flight. You're uncomfortable. Nobody really wants to be on the plane. But in a movie theater, it's the complete opposite. Like I can share my armrest, no sweat at a movie theater, but on a plane, it's sort of like, come on, you're taking more than your fair share, buddy. Come on. As we get kind of down to the end of this thing, Deb, one thing that has always really impressed me as well about what you're doing is you have an amazing talent for writing. Whether you're drafting a letter, my birthday cards that I get from you are some of the most well-written cards. And it's always so nice that you pick something specific and include it in there, which I always think is really great. But I know that you've also worked on some books as well.
Yeah.
And so with sitting down to do that, I've thought like, oh, I'm going to try writing a book. And then 20 minutes later, I have one paragraph. I'm like, no, screw it. I'm done. I'm walking away from this thing. Is it hard to put that? Did you set time away every day to sit down and work on pieces of it?
I did one of the things that I feel sort of is missing in my life is that I'm not writing like I was. I have 2 complete manuscripts. I wrote a novel first called Lay of the Land, and then I wrote a memoir called Someone Else's Children. And that was before I started doing ASA. So it's, I have 3 adopted daughters, and my first husband was a half Japanese war orphan that was adopted, and so on. So I have I come by the orphan work kind of naturally. It's just been, I was fascinated when I was growing up reading books about, Heidi and Anne of Green Gables, and there's a bunch of famous orphan books in the world, and so I also grew up at a time where I had 2 children, 2 boys, and I felt that was enough children. But I really wanted a daughter. I grew up the oldest of 4 girls, so it was like, oh, I have boys. What am I going to do with boys? And back then, you didn't know what you were having until they were born. And both times, I was certain I would have a girl because I just have a lot more experience with girls. So in any case, I had boys and had to learn how to be a mother of boys. And they have taught me a lot about people,
Mm-hmm.
So I am really fortunate in that way. And now I have grandchildren of both boys and girls. And so I think that when I met Joseph and he said he wanted to help orphans in the village he escaped as a kid, it was just right up my alley. And so it honestly stopped my writing career. Never became a career. I mean, I was starting to send out the memoir to agents and so on, but I just became immersed in working with these kids in South Sudan, first in South Sudan and then later in Uganda. And that has been more important work. It would be nice to publish the book, but that seems more like vanity, and that's not important to me. The fact that I wrote it is important to me, and who knows, maybe at some point I'll be able to revisit it. I think if I read, it's like 10 years from the time I wrote it, and so I might have a new perspective and do some editing that would make it more. But yeah, so maybe.
The world of writing has changed so much, even since you said even in a decade, with the fact that just like in the music industry, you don't really need publishers anymore. Like, publishers are trying to figure out how are we going to stay relevant in this? Because we've been the gatekeepers of books for so long, but now let's face it, tomorrow you could put that out in a digital format. You can just sit down in front of a microphone and read it, and you could be on Audible with it. And people are consuming those in greater and greater quantities versus going out to a bookstore and trying to find a specific title. Also, I think that even though it's your individual story, there's probably a lot of relatable material in there that other people say, oh my gosh, it's like she was sitting at our own dining room table having these same discussions about wanting to include people in our family. So I hope that at least one day even if you decide to put it out yourself, you do, because it's worthwhile.
You've given me a little, good. I just haven't, it's just been in a drawer for a long time. So
isn't that so I do that same thing where I have a project that is 95% done, and then I put it away and I never get to it. I started making cutting boards a couple of years ago using some woodworking skills, and I have 6 or 7 that are pretty much just waiting to be oiled at this point. And I always think next weekend, I'm going to get those things finished next weekend because I want to give them out as gifts. But when there's no immediacy for it, it's tough.
Well, maybe this weekend.
No, I'm totally booked this weekend. It just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
It just drives me crazy.
By the way, quick Wikipedia search: The Day the Clown Cried will be available to see in 2024.
2024.
So he died in 2015, and at that time, he had it donated to the Library of Congress, I believe, with the stipulation that it's not screened publicly until 2024.
There you go.
So I have to live at least 5 more years.
5 more years. We all have to live at least 5 more years to be able to see this glorious Jerry Lewis movie.
Oh, there you go.
And you guys are going to let me know.
We'll let you know.
When it
I'll
actually
put a
comes
reminder
out.
in my phone to call you as the moment it comes out.
That'd be perfect.
Is there any place on this planet you haven't visited yet that you'd like to?
Oh, that I'd like to? Oh, gosh.
Because you do a lot of traveling, too.
Yeah, but I don't travel very much for fun. Doug Hamilton and I are going on a road trip this summer.
Dougie Fresh.
Yes.
Previous podcast guest.
Yes. He told me he had been on this podcast.
I guess the governor is Dougie Fresh. That's
what is that what you call him?
Well, that's what I called him previously, but I'm going to call Hamilton Dougie Fresh too.
I think that works. So we're going to Denver to see my daughter Gina.
Great.
And we're driving my car because he has a Versa. It's a little teeny car. I have a Jeep Renegade because I am a renegade. And so we're going to go to Denver and visit my daughter Gina and her husband, Riza, who just got citizenship about a week ago.
Oh, congratulations to Riza. That was a very exciting moment. In fact, he's somebody I'd also like to have on the show, and I think we might do that via Skype.
Yeah. And, they could maybe come visit sometime, too.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. So anyway, he's a great guy. And then we're going to Spokane because his daughter's graduating from college in Spokane. And then we're going to visit my son Aaron in Yelm, which is near Seattle.
That's a great trip.
Yeah, and then we're going to drive home.
Are you going to visit Kathy while you're out there?
Oh, I will definitely make a trip to Whidbey.
Good move.
Yep.
Good move. Did you ever see the movie Double Jeopardy where the woman's accused of killing her husband and she didn't do it, and then she finds out that he's still alive, so when she gets out of prison after serving the time, she goes to track him down because you can't be convicted of killing the same guy twice.
I don't think I've seen that.
It's an Ashley Judd movie, and it's got Tommy Lee Jones. It's great. But
I love it.
The first 20 minutes is set on Whidbey Island. And
really?
That's my like little piece when Jill and I are watching it. Be like, let me tell you about this island, Jill.
She's like, oh, I can't wait to hear this.
She's like, oh, I've heard this a million times already.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Also, can we just watch Heavyweights?
That's how our relationship started, was with a quote from that movie.
Devil Log, right?
Yeah. You Devil Log. When Ben Stiller picks it up, I was like, that was when I knew it. I knew she was the one when she quoted this obscure movie I loved when I was a kid. Isn't that weird how...
That is, that is weird. But it's, it instills that connection that, we have this thing in common.
I still made her wait 12 years to get married, though. Like, even after that, I was like, well, we just got to see if it's all right.
That is a long time.
Just make sure that this just isn't a fluke.
I support it.
I support it.
Well, that road trip sounds like it'll be an absolute blast. And I imagine you'll be going through Yellowstone at some point, cutting back and forth.
They had a thing for a short time that if you were 65, you could get a lifetime Parks Pass, whatever.
Oh, yeah?
That's right, yeah.
And I have one.
Nice.
Really?
So I've never used it.
Oh, now's the time.
I'll have to bring it on this trip. Maybe we'll go through some national parks.
I drove from Fargo to Laramie, Wyoming, to Las Vegas, Nevada, to LA, to Tijuana, and then to Provo, Utah, and then Fargo on this epic road trip with my friend Jared. And one thing that we decided when we drove to Laramie was we were on the interstate the whole time. And we said, let's not take the interstate between Laramie and Las Vegas. And while that sounds like a great adventure, it is a horrible, horrible way to travel if you don't know where you're going.
Oh.
I would never take Highway 10 to get down to the lakes area. So, for example, I would always take the Downer Road and these back roads. But if I wasn't from this area, I would definitely take Highway 10 where I know that there's filling stations and it's an easy one shot and you just turn here. But exploration is still a lot of fun, and seeing those roadside attractions I think are always great. But I am not always brave enough to do that when I'm traveling, because part of me wants to get to the destination. And it's like, well, I want to spend time in Denver. I don't want to spend an extra 5 hours tooling around a highway trying to figure out where I am at the time. But
traveling in Uganda is a little tricky. We hire drivers and so on. And on our last trip where we were being taken to the safari park, and the driver who drove us had completely bald tires on his, SUV. And so when we got a flat, and so what did he do? Maybe we were in the town when it happened. So he bought they were tubeless tires, but he bought a tube to put in the tire and as a backup or whatever. And anyway, they put a plug in the whatever the hole was and so on, and then we continued on our journey.
Oh,
but bald tires. No
AAA in Uganda?
No, they don't have that.
They should get on that.
They only have 2 A's.
They barely have gas stations. Of course, most people don't have vehicles either.
Yeah.
God, it's just it's hard for me to imagine that I'm taking for granted all of the things that I have in my modern day 21st century life here in Fargo that don't exist in other places.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. I got some YouTube videos I want to watch.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to order some food on Food Dude's delivery, and I'm just going to sit and share.
Or even just like imagine a place where knowledge is passed down more by human being to human being.
Yes.
So actually teaching someone how to, sow a field, or teaching someone how to build those bricks in a way, versus if I went home and I wanted to learn how to stain my deck, I would probably not ask another human being. I would look up a YouTube video of it.
Oh, sure.
I wouldn't even go to the library. I wouldn't even go and ask the help of someone in a hardware store. Be like, I got the internet.
I literally just looked up wood staining on YouTube the other day. I have a little tiny box. I've never stained anything. I want to stain this little thing first and try it out and see if that's something I'd do more in the future.
You didn't even bother to ask anybody. You just looked it up online.
YouTube.
Huh.
So YouTube. If you've never heard of it, YOUTUBE .com.
Yeah, .com. Which stands for what?
Computer. I don't know.
I don't know. We all know that it's www for World Wide Web,
Right.
but we don't know what .com, .gov government.
Yeah.
That's clear.
Yeah. .edu education. Where are the other ones? There's a lot now, right?
Oh yeah,
Maybe
there's
it's commerce.
everything.
Oh.
There you go.
Because it's a commercial website of some kind. Even if it's your personal one, you had to purchase.
We should get a .jjmw so we can be jjmeetsworld.jjmw.
be looking for that in 2024 as soon as we screen The Day the Clowns Cried. Deb, thank you so much for coming in and making some time this morning.
My pleasure.
This was a lot of fun. If people want to find African Soul American Heart online, what's the easiest way to track it down?
Well, ASAH, ASAH, in Sudan.org, or just African Soul American Heart. You'll find it.
And you guys are always, of course, looking for donations. You're looking for people who want to get on board with this and follow the dream.
What's the name of the newest film again?
The newest film is called African Sojourn.
Okay.
We don't have it available yet on our website at some point, but right now we're trying to do screenings various places and have people physically come and see the film. It's pretty cool. Jessica Wunderlich, the director and videographer and editor and the everything, she's very talented, and she's traveled with me, I don't know, 7 or 8 times over a number of years, and so it's footage from South Sudan and Kenya and Uganda, and shows kind of the development of our program and so on. So she's pretty amazing, and I'm really fortunate to have this film.
Good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Like, so good. Like,
It's so good.
It is amazing. It is amazing to me to think of the first time I heard about this was in Bab's Coffee Shop on Main Avenue, where John had gathered a bunch of us together, where Dana said, I will never blog. Don't ask me to blog. I only write on pen and paper, and be like, oh, how times have changed.
Yeah.
Yes.
But to think how far this has grown is really just amazing. And so congratulations.
Thank you.
And I hope you're very proud of the work that you do.
I am. And I love these kids, these young ladies. They're getting bigger, and they all call me mommy. I could be their grandmother, but that's an honor.
Oh, that's really nice. That's really nice. Well, thanks again, Deb. A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today, because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year, on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com and you can find direct contact info for JJ. There's certain brands where I say the brand and not the product. Like, I don't say adhesive bandage, I say Band-Aid, but I will never say Kleenex. Never. God damn it, except for right now.